We have been studying Sri Aurobindo's commentary on the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, which he says is at once the most obscure and the profoundest of the Upanishads. And following his commentary, we have recognized that the entire Upanishad is articulated by a certain caste of mind which is very different from the modern mind. And even the language which is used is quite remote. In our study of his commentary, we have come now to practically the last page of his commentary. And before entering the text, because of the fact that we have had a long gap in between, I think it worthwhile to look at the entire Upanishad now from a larger vision, observing the distinctiveness of the mindset which articulated its vision and experience in these words. We have seen in our study that the entire cosmic creative energy has been described as a gigantic cosmic horse, and the whole of the universe is now an expression of this power, the horse. How this power articulates itself is then described in the various parts and movements of the horse, its powers. But why horse? What is it that made these rishis choose this symbol? And it is this which I briefly wish to explore today. When the human being has an experience and wishes to articulate that experience, there is a natural tendency to give form to something which we experience within ourselves, essentially in a formless state. And so this movement of giving form to the formless, the rishis see as a replica, a repetition of the same process by which the universe took form out of the formless, unmanifest. We are, each one of us, a microcosm. Each one of us potentially, in essence, in our deepest truth, one with the self, and therefore potentially co-creators of the divine, participating in his self-expression in the manifestation of the universe. And each time that we try to draw out something from our deeper experience and express it in the world of form, we are participating in that creative process of the divine, although unconsciously, although in a much reduced, diluted, distorted, disfigured manner. But still, we are participating in that process. And so, it is easy to draw on analogies of human language to be able to recognize why the rishis chose this symbol. I tried to see what examples one could draw on, and I began with a few very mundane examples. We have created a device which we have been using now extensively for the last 20 years. But the name we have given to this device was a name given to it maybe 50 years ago, when the device was not in such extensive use. But the name sticks. And the name of this device is computer. If you observe what the word means, this little box here, is a computer. My mobile phone has within it two or even three computers. What does the word computer mean? Computer is that which computes, it calculates. But when we actually use a computer, we are not thinking of calculation. We're doing things completely different. An artist sits and paints on the computer. A musician creates music. We watch movies. But when we watch a movie on a computer, we don't think of computation, calculation. So why do we call it computer? We can say historically, 50 years ago, the computer was used only for computing mathematics tables. It was used during the Second World War to calculate rapidly the trajectory of a ballistic missile. You shoot a cannon and you want to calculate where exactly it will fall. To make corrections for wind speeds, for angle of shot, and various other changes in the landscape. And so you had to have a machine which could calculate very quickly and make tables. And this was the origin of this machine that we call computer. So it is natural to call it computer. The word itself comes from a period just before the Second World War, where people were called computers who were good at quick mathematics. So scientists who needed to do rapid maths calculations or draw tables would telephone a computer. And this is a man who sits down and does the calculations very quickly. And now you replace that man by a machine which did the same thing, so you called it computer. But today we still continue to call it computer. We do not call it movie player. The phone we still call a phone, although it's made of computers inside. Why do we still call this thing a computer? Because if you observe what it actually does internally, its special feature is not what it displays on the screen. That's the outcome of that. Its special feature is inside, it is calculating continuously. Everything it does, its very temperament, its very swabhava, its innate nature is to calculate, to process numbers, patterns of numbers which are continuously changed, converted, calculated, recalculated in different ways. And therefore, its essential nature is still computer. And it seems to be the right word to the name to give to it, because the name expresses most accurately its soul. If you take away that computing facility, you have nothing left. You have a television which also shows you the same movie, but you will not call the television a computer because within it does nothing really significant for calculation. It is display which is most important there. So in this way, when we have to articulate an experience or give name to some special function, force, facility, object, event, it is that essential character which we try to draw out, which distinguishes it from everything else in the universe. I was just wondering because thinking about an example, I was sitting on a chair, I said, well, why do we call table table? Why do we call chair a chair? And if you actually go to look at the etymology of these words, one comes across very surprising things, and sometimes they're rooted in the history also. But the origin of the word is not always obvious. When I thought of it from the perspective of history, in Indian languages, we do not have a very convenient word for chair. Because as it was culturally, most people did not sit on such devices. We preferred to sit on the ground or on a raised platform, but not necessarily something which you lean back on, except for those who were an elite, to whom you wanted to give a special respect. And then the Indian vocabulary for that would be asana, or Singhasana, the lion seat, or asana simply being seat. In English, we would say throne. And if you look at the etymology of the word throne, then interestingly, it comes from the Greek thronos, in which you go back one more step and you discover it is, at least in the etymology as we today record it goes to a pre-Greek, pre-Latin language, which they call the Proto-Indo-European language. And in that we find it actually connects to the word dharma, interestingly, which supports, which holds up. And it also connects to dhair, which is from the Latin side of dharma. But again, the same idea of supporting, upholding. And you realize that's the true function of the throne or the seat, to hold you up, to support, to provide a stable base, something which does not shake. And one would never have thought of it when you think of the word chair. The modern mind has got so superficialized that it is used to simply making associations. This form, this word. We do not think, we do not feel, we do not go back to the source of that correspondence. But the ancient mind did. Not only they did, they lived in that correspondence and the essence of that connection. For them, that connection was more important even than the word used, the particular form of the word used. And this is the first point we have to distinguish between the modern mind and that very ancient mind. For that mind, the reality, the essential truth of the thing was more living than the particular form and clothes in which it had expressed itself in the world of form. It saw that essential truth and tried to draw that out and express it. So when a language was used to articulate something, the particular form of the language was secondary. It was the force behind which was being expressed, which was primary. And you can see immediately that such a speech would be much more flexible, much more fluid, more creative, more spontaneous. But on the other side, the mind itself would be looking for essentialities. When you look at chair hereafter, make an effort as an exercise to think of, oh, this is something which upholds, which creates a stable base on which something else can be placed. When you think of it in this way, the whole relationship with that object is very different. You may even begin to relate to it with greater respect. You may even begin to feel in it as the relationship that you have with a person. You may even feel grateful. Oh, thank you for holding me up, for creating this stable base. And there is a mindset which looks at all things in this way. When further exploring this, I even looked at the source of the etymology of the word chair from the English language. And it was interesting that they don't go too far. They don't seem to be able to trace back. There is one word which is cathedra, which means seat. But interestingly, it is also the word which is used, the base for cathedral. And you wonder why chair and cathedral have the same root. And again, it goes to a historical base, coming back to the same idea, the seat of power. The person who holds the power is seated on this raised platform, and that is the seat of power in the cathedral from which the authority extends. And the chair becomes now symbolic of seat of power. And when you think of it in this way, an upholding base is also therefore the originator of power. A further variation which we may find when we look at the chair is it is an expression of respect. When you have somebody who to you represents power, whom you have placed in a position of power with respect to yourself because of greater knowledge, greater authority, whatever it is, you give him this chair as a symbol. Now you see what happens. Although there is a basic function of the chair, a basic character, it has now accumulating around it variations, derivations. So from the dharma upholding base, seat, support, comes the seat of power, comes the mark of respect, and then more and more variations around it until something very mundane, which is the common use today, oh, a place to sit, to be comfortable. But you see a chain like that following. Some of it goes through variations in history, but the root principle remains permanent. So the beauty of this is in the Upanishads, in the Vedas, because they went always to the essentiality, although we may vary the specific meanings and forms over time because of historical and other reasons, we may get superficial, the essential truth is still being permanent, is still present. And it's possible for us to dig through to regain that. And then suddenly from there, everything else, all the derivations get a new energy, a new force, a new meaning. And the world itself is experienced differently. Such is the nature of our experience as we enter into the mindset of the rishis and the way in which they expressed their vision of the cosmos. And in the case of the Brihadaranyaka, the rishi is trying here to articulate a vision of the entirety of the cosmos. With a chair, we saw very simply it is this support raised, stable base. You take a tree, and again with the tree, you could look at a primary, essential function, and then deriving from it so many other things. So the tree itself may be a strong supporting base which moves to express plentifulness. It could be the embodiment of life energy rooted in stone. It could be the plentifulness of the fruit, the nourishment that it spreads, the flowers and the beauty of its rich expression of form, subtlety, which it puts out. It can be seen as a place of refuge for the birds, where it can make a home, a place of rest where it gives you shade. Now, all of these would emerge from whatever essential character we saw of the tree. But the tree is not fully captured until you get to that essential character. So, again, looking at the totality of the cosmos, we could see many things. But what would we describe as its essential character? Before we come to the text of the Brihadaranyaka and the choice that the Rishi makes here, or the experience which he articulates, we can briefly explore what we would want to express or what we would see first, and what are the variations which we could find to that. A lot of this would come from our capacity to know the universe. How much do we truly know of the universe? The modern mind, and especially the conditioning coming from science, is very shallow. When we look at the universe, the picture that comes naturally to us is a large number of stars or galaxies, but filled with empty space, black, dark, pitch black. At least that's how we would tend to conceive of it because of the images that have been thrown to us. The Vedic Rishi, though, saw differently, much more deeply, and he saw not only this physical appearance, but all of the subtler realms. The most physical form of the universe, we may say, is this sense of a vast empty space with the stars and the little solar systems accumulated in clusters of galaxies and so on. But if you look deeply, even with the understanding of the modern science, not necessarily with its vision, because its vision is still partial, but with the understanding, we may say, oh, it is an ocean of energy. unformed in what we call empty space, formed in what we call stars and planets, but still ocean of energy. But we still see a dense material energy. The rishis saw many gradations of energies. And the totality of all these energies as so many grades held in one gigantic form of expression, infinite, extending across time, eternal. But what is the characteristic of the universe? Not the spread of the stars. They saw also from a larger sense of time, because they lived in a consciousness. As soon as you withdraw in approach to the self, time and space are not so relevant. You see an expanse of space of infinity, you see an eternity, but what do you see across that eternity? You see this tremendous movement of unfolding change. So the nature of the energy is not just an ocean of energy, but a moving energy. And we're coming now to the image which naturally comes. A huge energy, but still, what is characteristic of this moving energy? I may look at a river and still see moving energy. What is special about the universe, and especially in this large picture, and you must see as big as you can, is the edge where the universe comes into being. Where does it come into being? It's not coming into being on one part of space and disappearing in another part of space. It's not coming into being at one point in time and ending at another point of time. It is coming into being everywhere at the same time, across space and time. It is a movement out of unmanifest state into manifest. Now, when you look at the universe like this, oh, it is something which is emerging out of the unmanifest, moving into manifestation, and a part of it which has been already in manifestation, receding back, subsiding into the unmanifest. And what you see, the character of this whole thing is a tremendous power and energy moving into manifestation. And so you have the first essential character of the universe, this energy of movement, emerging out of the unmanifest, pouring into manifestation. What is the name one would give to it? We have also studied in between the etymology of the sounds, the way language emerges. And you will recall Sri Aurobindo's observation that as a vibration comes out of the unmanifest to move into manifestation, there is first a contactual vibration, then a force from that contact, and then the particular expression of the form. And we saw the various sounds, representing absolute existence, U representing relative existence, E representing relative existence, and U pervasive, contained, or progressive existence. And then each of the following letters of the alphabet, K, K, G, Gh, and so on, each having a particular contactual vibration, force, and form. And if you look at it in this way, I don't look at the table again, but the word would be natural to mean this existence, specifically the absolute out of which the relative emerges. But then comes the sh of the ashwa. Sh is vehemence in union. That is the character of the vibration that comes. Vehemence in union is what Sri Aurobindo gives to it. And the V, manifest existence. Very interesting. Verse Sri Aurobindo attributes to in its force and contactual vibration to the sense of manifest existence. So from the absolute existence, there is this transition through Shah, a vehemence of union, and then the manifest existence in the verb. And the absolute existence, manifest existence are as if connected by this Shah in a brief transition, holding their unity. So Ashwa is the form most expressive in sound of this particular character of the experience. And Ashva is also the word which has been used to name other forms which have a similar character of force, of energy moving to express, in particular, the horse. Ashva is the name given to the horse, but Ashva also articulates this particular experience, and therefore it would be natural to represent this moving energy as a horse. In this way, you will find all of the Vedic names and even subsequently the words are so derived. Sri Aurobindo, in his commentaries on the Veda, goes to this root, and his interpretation of the Veda also draws on this. But you see now, the character of this kind of an association makes for naturally multiple meanings, or even I will say multiple experiences or multiple ways of perceiving that one experience. In the most essential experience, I will see this tremendous power moving to manifest Ashva. At a secondary level, when I am no more in that state of deep, profound identity with that energy and that grand vision, I will see in mind the movement out of the unmanifest, the manifestation. And it is now a mental idea, philosophical idea, no more intuitively experienced, but conceived in mind as idea. And then I still need an image, a form in which to be able to see, whether with mind's eye or with physical eyes. And so I use the third level, which is the physical representation of the horse energy, the energy of movement that surges out and moves to express itself. And automatically there is therefore this three levels in which the experience could be felt or described. And this is what the Vedic tradition speaks of, the three levels of experiencing the Vedic knowledge. We have in our study tried always to bridge across these three, moving frequently across these three levels. Sri Aurobindo himself helps us to bridge these things, and he goes back all the way to the highest to get to the deepest truths, and then the reference to the specific or the form. So the very verse begins in the translation, Om, dawn is the head of the horse, sacrificial. And naturally, the very first thing you've seen is this energy. You want to describe how the energy expresses itself. So the head, the frontal part of the energy is the most interesting. It's there that all the creation happens. And what does it do as it creates? It first sees. And what it sees, it fills with its energy. And then it casts that into a form, a whirling, moving, repetitive, and therefore now apparently stable form. The sun is his eye, which sees. The breath is the wind, which infuses the life energy. His wide open mouth is Agni, fire, the master might universal, which casts into form. And then the most essential character of this unfolding process is time. But time as a rhythmic unfoldment. Time is the self of the horse sacrificial. Now with this, we have moved already one step deeper into specifics. The essential character of the whole cosmos was captured in Ashva, but now the Ashva itself is being described in its most important functions, how it creates, how it brings into manifestation. And then the scope of that creation. Heaven is his back, mid-world his belly, earth is his footing. And at some point we say, well, since we are making this association with the horse, why not look for other natural relations? And you may go quite deep, looking for flanks, ribs, and joints, where he stands, the food in the stomach, the veins, liver, lungs, etc. But we may ask, is this a forced association or is it a natural perception? You saw something and you said, oh, this would associate with this part of the horse. For the Vedic rishis, they never forced it. They always saw deeper truth and then gave it articulation. And you can always find in the horse some part, some function which corresponds to that specific power of the cosmos. For the simple reason that the horse is also a microcosm. Now we have looked at horse because we saw the universe as this tremendous power moving into manifestation as the essential character. But could we have seen it differently? And I would venture to say yes, we could. And it would be really a choice of what we want to highlight. You see, when you look at a horse, there's not too much that you can see as its essential character. When you look at a chair, there's not too much that you can see as essential. The seat uplifted, supporting as a stable base is its essence. The backrest being there or not, being tall or short is secondary. Whether it has 4 legs or 3 legs or 5 legs doesn't matter. Whether it has wheels is not so important. But with the universe, when you go back all the way to the oneness has many major facets of its self-expression. And you could take any one of them and see it as the most prominent. The Rishi here chooses this aspect of the power of manifestation, power moving to manifest. But we could have seen it differently, and therefore a different facet, a different form, a different identification of image might take place. Thinking of what might be some of them, I was naturally drawn to the text that we are already studying on Friday from the Synthesis of Yoga, where Sri Aurobindo gives a series of images to describe the absolute and its relation to the universe. He says, you remember the passage where he says, the absolute is beyond personality, beyond impersonality. It is both personal and impersonal, beyond unity, beyond multiplicity. It is both one and multiple, etc. And then there is a line where he says, it is the cosmic and the supracosmic spirit, the supreme Lord, the supreme self, the supreme Purusha, the supreme Shakti, the ever unborn who is endlessly born, the infinite who is innumerably finite, the multitudinous one, the complex, simple, the ever, the complex, simple, the many-sided single, the word of the silence ineffable, the impersonal, omnipresent person, the mystery. So all of these are already ways of looking at that one. And you see in the approach of the Brihadaranyaka, the power is captured in these ideas. The ever unborn who is endlessly born also implied the Shakti, the creative power, and also implied is the multitudinous one. But essentially, it is this vision of the ever unborn who is endlessly born and this movement of endless births unfolding. But you could have taken any of these different visions, glimpses of the divine, and taken that as the primary character of the divine consciousness and imaged it in what would be the most natural image, the word form which would most effectively express that. So it's just a way I wanted to highlight this because I wanted to bring forward this idea that the Rishi may choose which aspect, which particular experience of the divine vision he is trying to express. And this perhaps is most relevant for us, which is being articulated here. And yet, if you articulate this, all the other aspects are drawn in, they're pulled in somehow as secondary facets of this one vision. So if you look, for example, here there is this text, the word of the silence ineffable. And you'll see how in the text of the Brihadaranyaka, there is at the end of verse 1, speech verily is the sound of him. You see how that idea has been captured and brought into the verse. And I would believe if we explored a little bit, we might find each of these different facets of looking at the divine somehow represented in the text. Some not, doesn't matter. But the idea being, if you try to capture something essential, there will be many possibilities of the essential when you approach the one absolute, and they will all tend to cluster around whatever choice you make in your articulation. The most complete articulation, the most perfect, which captures all of these in a single go, could not be expressed in word. Because in the very act of bringing into sound, you have to reduce, you have to narrow down. If somehow the full experience was given articulation, it would be like manifesting a whole new universe. It would be the sound of the Big Bang. And so we give to that vibration the name Pranava. Pranava is the creative vibration and most completely expressed in Om. And so the verse itself begins with Om Usha Va Ashvasya Medhyasya Shira and so on. So the Om is that as completely expressible without bursting out a whole new universe, and then this aspect flows out from it, the horse. So I thought this is interesting today because we are approaching the text after a gap, and now we will appreciate why horse and the sacred horse. And in the last portion of the text we are now reading, of Sri Aurobindo's commentary, he has moved to the second verse and the last portion of the second verse, where already the horse as the creative power manifesting has taken on four specific grades of expression corresponding to four grades of beings that are expressed in the cosmos. The gods and the highest, the Gandharvas, the Titans, and then humanity. And the horse takes on four different names for these four different kinds of beings. Haya for the gods, and the root sound of Haya, the etymology takes us to this movement which is swift, free, joyous, bounding, because the gods are free beings. Vajin, to carry the Gandharvas, and the root of Vajin goes back to the sense of plenty, of wealth, of plenitude, of possession. Vajin. And then the Titans are carried by Arvan, which in the root from the Ar expresses leadership, mastery, the fighter, and that's the character of the Titans. And then mankind, humanity, is Ashva. But Ashva here, Sri Aurobindo points now to the next verse, where the same Ash root has been taken up and a different word, a different emphasis drawn from it. from the nature of the material world, which is existence of matter, permanence of material form as it appears to us, comes also the character of decay and death. And Ashanaya Mrityu is the phrase which Sri Aurobindo points to in the next verse of the Brihadaranyaka, where Ashana is the hunger and death, which is hunger, being the character of the material consciousness of matter itself. This now prepares us for the next verse where the material world is being focused upon. We saw a grand picture of the cosmos, the horse, and the first two verses of the Upanishad articulated this. And now already the vision of the Rishi is turning towards the material world, which is going to be the next exploration of the next chapter, the next section of the Upanishad. And the image of the horse will now be set aside, and the transition is being made. Here comes the fourth function of the horse, to upbear humanity in the world of death, of hunger, of matter. But when you look at these four gradations which were described as the Rishi took from the highest vision down to the lowest in matter, we see four grades representing certain qualities. In the godly region, the divine region, is this tremendous freedom, wideness, joyous expression. In the next grade, there is this possession of plenty of wealth. In the third grade, there is this force, fighting, struggling to overcome. And in the lowest level of matter is this self-devouring hunger, but an enjoyment still, which is permeating, but self-devouring even as it enjoys. You see something interesting across the four gradations, and I've touched upon it briefly earlier. They are grades through which humanity ascends to the highest freedom of the gods. From this self-devouring character of our life, where we are seeking always a momentary enjoyment, momentary pleasure, fulfillment of the immediate desire that pulls us, we stand back to put forward one forceful will and choose to transcend the mechanical life and assert a greater freedom of our choice. That's all we can do. Who asserts? I, the ego person. And I have to concentrate all my energies, pull back from my desire instinct and will something. But since the will comes from my own ego, it is a limited capacity which will fail eventually. And it is an obsessive ego-based consciousness. And that's the character of the Titans. But it is by this that I fight. I acquire a poise of leadership and mastery over my own nature. But it is still not a true enjoyment. I'm struggling at that point. I'm even putting myself through a severe discipline and even self-chosen suffering as I master my own nature. And a step above that is the domain of the Gandharvas, where you have the sense of possession, but with plenty. A freedom from ignorance begins. I rise to a higher grade of consciousness. It is no more a driving ego-based will, but an opening to something higher, which inspires, which fills, which brings a greater joy. But I am not yet entirely free until I make the passage all the way to the highest freedom of the gods, borne up now by higher, the highest station of the energy of the horse, of the cosmic horse, free, joyous, bounding, swiftly playing out in the domain of light, the domain of the Deva, the light. So it describes also across the four stages the ascent of humanity in its journey. And all of this is implied in the expression here. Sri Aurobindo says that the character in matter now is this, that form of force in matter that is self destroying because it wastes or preys upon others is humanity's vahana, vehicle, the energy which carries us. But remember, at the same time, there is the pointing upwards to a higher energy which can carry us also, but we have to pass through these grades. In between, in a sense, we replicate the character of the Titans, the character of the Gandharvas, demigods, until we rise eventually to the realm and the character of the gods. This word self destroying, there's a footnote here which says doubtful reading. It could equally have been self devouring, which is more accurate here. But if it stops here, it would be incomplete. And so the link is always to point us to the source of our freedom. And that comes in the last portion when the verse ends with a simple statement: the sea was his brother and the sea was his birthplace. So Sri Aurobindo comments on this. Finally, there comes a consummation to the parable of the horse, in which the thought of the Upanishad opens out to the ultimate idea, for which the image of the horse is only a pratishtha and a preface. Pratishtha means base, support. The horse has been, the creative power has been imaged as a horse, as a base for our mind to be able to see it, visualize it, conceive it in some way. But what's the idea to which the Rishi wants to point? The liberation from Ashanaya Mrityu, from the hunger that is death, the nature of the material world. The liberation from this is what the Rishi wants to take us to, and which is the theme of the rest of the Upanishad. So the preface is the horse, this grand image of the cosmos, and then eventually the four stations, the four gradations of energy that the horse expresses itself as to support, four gradations of beings, and the lowest station where the human being lives. But then the rest of the Upanishad will be, how does the human being liberate himself from this domain of hunger that is death, and attain to the highest station of his true freedom. So of this horse of the worlds, who bears up all beings, the sea is the brother, and the sea is the birthplace. And Sri Aurobindo says, there can be no doubt of the meaning of this symbol. It is the upper ocean of the Veda in which it imaged the superior and divine existence. These are the waters of the supramaterial causality. From that, this lower ocean of our manifestation derives its waters, its flowing energies, apaha. And from that, when the Vritras are slain and the firmaments opened, it is perpetually replenished. And of that, it is the shadow and the reproduction of its circumstances under the conditions of mental illusion, avidya, mother of limitation and death. This image not only consummates this passage, but opens a door of escape from that which is to follow. Deliverance from the dominion of Ashanaya Mrityu is possible because of this circumstance, that this sea of divine being is bandhu, kin and friend to the horse. The aparardha, the upper ocean, proves to be of the same essential nature as the parardha. The aparardha, lower ocean, proves to be the same essential nature as the parardha, the upper ocean. Our mortal part is kin to our unlimited and immortal part, because the horse of the worlds, in his essence, comes to us from that divine source and partakes of its nature. And from what other except this ocean can the horse of the worlds, who is material yet supramaterial, be said to have derived his being? So here comes the clue why the verse ends with this very strange statement. The If you've seen in itself, it'll sound strange. The sea was his brother, and the sea was his birthplace. Of a horse, brother is the sea, and birthplace. And you will say, oh, these ancients, they were a little strange. They had some strange fantasy, and perhaps the modern historian will try to force fit some strange meaning to it. Maybe the ancients saw the sea god in the shape of a horse and make some strange images. Unfortunately, that's how people have been so confused of the deeper symbolism of the ancients. But the truth is very simple, and it goes back to the several Vedic images, four of them that Sri Aurobindo immediately draws on, which we will explore in detail next time. But the first and most important of these images of the Veda is two oceans, the upper ocean and the lower ocean. The upper ocean is the Satchidananda, the ocean of immortality, where the divine consciousness lives in its oneness. The lower ocean is the domain of mind, life, matter, where consciousness is essentially fragmented. And because of fragmentation, avidya, you have limitation and death as the essential character of all life here. And our journey in evolution is from the lower ocean to the upper ocean. But is such a journey possible if they are different? And this is the beauty of the statement. The lower ocean derives from the upper. The waters of the lower ocean come down from the upper ocean. And what's the natural image we have in human experience? Rain. Water falling, which fills the rivers and the oceans below. Where does it come from? From above. So you see how beautiful the image is, simply naturally representing. But what is it that releases the rain? And now comes the interesting series, the chain. We find the natural processes of rain formation correspond actually to the gradations of consciousness and the particular barriers and the means of removal of the barriers by which the higher consciousness links with the lower. And that is how very easily the Veda can use images of thunder, of lightning, of clouds, of dispersal of clouds, revealing the sun or covering the sun, and so on. All these images can be naturally used to describe spiritual truths and realities. But here, very simply, the text, he says, the Vritras are slain and the firmaments opened. That's it, the waters fall. But we will see next time how that works. And most important, the lower ocean, therefore, derived from the upper, is in essence of the same nature as the upper. But in its expression, it is a shadow, a reproduction of those of its circumstances under the conditions of avidya, mental illusion, which leads to limitation and death. The same water has entered a condition of divided consciousness, but the water is same. When the same water represents in the condition of divided consciousness, this is the outcome. And therefore, the horse of the worlds, as it carries the human being in the domain of hunger, that is death, bound in ignorance, the same horse is able to lead us up all the way because the ocean is his brother and the ocean is its source. It came down as this Ashwa carrying the human being. It came down from the domain of the heavens, and at the same time, the heavens are its brother. They are of the same essential nature. What does that mean when we look at the symbol that it represents? It means the energy which carries us is in its origin sourced in the divine consciousness, and in its essence, it is still divine. And what is this energy that is carrying us in our experience of the world of hunger, that is death and ignorance, the life instinct, the energy of the instincts which push us. What makes us do what we do? What makes us want to live? What makes us want to grow? What makes us want to conquer our circumstances? The instinct which is pushing is already in its origin divine, and in its essential nature it is still divine, although in its particular form and expression it is all confused and distorted by the condition of illusion, mental illusion of avidya, ignorance. And it is this, therefore, which is the secret and the saving grace, and which can assure us that this horse, Ashwa, can lead us all the way to the fulfillment. And he ends the text with, we appearing mortal, we appearing bound, mortal, and limited, are manifestations of a free and infinite reality. And from that from which we are born comes friendship and assistance for that which we are, towards making us that which we shall be. So there is from above, from the divine consciousness, constantly this friendship and this help, because we are bought from there. And the help comes to help us to become what we shall be. From our kindred heavens, the love descends always, that works to raise up the lower to its brother, the higher. There's a footnote with the word love, where Sri Aurobindo has put an alternate, the force. From our kindred heavens, the force, that is the Ashva, the horse. The force descends always, that works to raise up the lower to its brother, the higher. And that is how he ends this commentary. It is obviously incomplete. He might have chosen to have written more. But by itself, it is complete enough that we can now appreciate the whole sense of the parable of the cosmic horse. So, next time we will view the specific Vedic images and the deeper spiritual symbols and truths that they conceal. We can meditate briefly on this idea. From our kindred heavens, the love, the force, descends always, that works to raise up the lower to its brother, the higher. In the phrasing, Samudra eva asya bandhu samudro yoni. The sea was his brother and the sea was his birthplace.